Good evening. Welcome, folks. Good morning for those who are joining from the US. Right? We are pleased to welcome you to another edition of a Profit.co webinar. And I'm very glad to invite two of our customers, right, for this fireside chat. So we are doing a new format today. We are doing a fireside chat with two professionals. Right? So we have here Diane Whaley. Diane is the Vice President of Siemon, right? And I will let her introduce herself, Vice President of Human Resources. And we have Pamela Fung, who is the Vice President of Human Resources, again, from our customer Herculite, right? So welcome to both of you, and thanks a lot for taking the time to share your thoughts. I'll introduce the topic in a moment, but before that, Diane and Pamela, would you like to introduce yourself as well as Herculite and Siemon as well? Yeah.
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be on this webinar and fireside chat. My name is Diane Veely. I am the Vice President of Human Resources for the Siemon Company. We are headquartered in Watertown, Connecticut. We are a global organization. We are a privately owned family business celebrating 121 years of business this year. And currently, Henry Siemon is our fifth Siemon family generation president to whom I work for, and I've been with the company for over 26 years.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Pamela Funk. I work for Herculite Products. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources. Also work for a private company, family owned. We've been around for almost 70 years. Not always family owned, but we are now. I've been here for a little over 3 years, but my career has primarily been based in the textile industry and manufacturing.
Okay, great. That's awesome. And Pamela, I heard that Herculite, played a pretty important role, during the COVID, right, with some of your products, being very relevant for the COVID recovery, right? Can you maybe tell us a few words about it? What do you do?
Yeah, so we manufacture laminated textiles, so essentially vinyls. Those vinyls go into things like tents, awnings, pool covers. So, everybody had the tents and the awnings going on when we were doing the outdoor, indoor dining. Unfortunately, we also did the fabrics for the body bags. So when people passed from COVID, and we also do a lot of healthcare products as well.
Great, that's awesome.
Can I just add? I'm sorry. Can I just add? Also during COVID, we are a manufacturer of structured cabling systems, so we also provided cabling for those those pop-up centers, if you will. So we were actually open, during COVID as well, and supported hospitals, et cetera. So thank you, Pamela, for the work that you all did. I'm sure it all helped. We all helped each other.
Yep.
Great. That's awesome, Pamela and Diane. And folks, we really brought this context, right, of the challenges that they faced during COVID, primarily to bring focus to the topic of the day, right? So the topic of the day is, transforming performance management, right? A data-driven, employee-centric approach, right? So this is a topic, and the format that we're going to have is that of a fireside chat, right? And we will have a set of questions, and I'll probably, the first about 40 minutes, I'm going to go with the questions, right? But I absolutely encourage the audience to start, typing your questions, right? So you can see the Q&A, right? You can type the questions in the Q&A, and if we see relevant questions, right? So I'm going to bring the questions ahead of time. And so we're going to have a dedicated Q&A session for the last 15 minutes, but relevant, important, topical questions are going to be brought in, as we do the discussion itself, right? So now, before we dive into the questions, right? Why is this topic important, right? Why is performance management? What are the current challenges with performance management, right? There are a lot of stats around this area, right? Globally, right? A lot of surveys have said that only 20% of employees feel inspired by their reviews, right? More than 50% think that their reviews are biased, right? And similarly, the picture from the manager's side is not very different, right? And more than 95% of managers globally are not fully satisfied, right? In fact, they're dissatisfied with their performance review system, right? And from HR perspective, surveys say that the performance review process has not really kept pace with the business needs, right? And it's not really always meeting their objectives, right? So it looks like performance management is ripe for disruption, right? From all aspects, right? So doing once a year, end of the year performance appraisal, for all the employees together, that may be a bit of an archaic process, right? But what do these innovators are doing, right? What are they doing? How are they seeing, the whole landscape changing, right? That's exactly what we would like to know. And, please type your questions, challenges, whatever you would like to know from these two folks. And we will, bring in the questions ahead, right? So probably let's get started. When you performance review, process really starts at the beginning of the, I would say, time, right? At the beginning of the time period, setting goals for the employees, right? So my first question, to both of you is that, how do you ensure that the employee goals align with your company priorities, right? How do you really go about doing that? Pamela,
Sure,
would you
I'll
like to
go
start?
first.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
Dan,
you.
please go
So
ahead. Yeah.
we have for a very long time had a practice of sharing our top company goals with our employees and give them an update every quarter on where we are with those. Our president also does a monthly, we call it a town hall, where he records an update on how the company's doing during the month with regard to financial goals, and we celebrate anniversaries and awards. But he also will give an update on where we are with our company goals. So the best way we have found to do that is to keep it front of mind and top of mind for them, and continually give them updates and display that information to all employees.
Okay, awesome. And has this been a process, this level of transparency and communicating the goals? Dan, has it been the process always, or has it changed in the recent past?
Good question. It has been more transparent over the last few years, and I think just a different. I mentioned Henry Siemon is our president now. He took over almost 4 years ago, and younger generation and has that desire to have more transparency. Again, we are a family-owned business and always have been. So, there's not as much disclosure of information, but certainly, being in front of the employees and giving them updates and as much information, as he can, has definitely been his philosophy. We have had a practice of doing that. It's 26 years that I've been with the company, but I've seen more transparency and a willingness to do that over the last few years.
That's amazing. And what do you think has been the employee response, right? How do employees feel about being exposed to the company goals, that level of transparency, right? How do they feel about it?
I think our employees are, it's helped our employee engagement. They feel that they know more what's going on, and look at ways that they can help us continue to achieve, our goals. So it's definitely been a very positive change for us.
Great. That's excellent to know that, it's really had an impact on employee engagement, right? And so, switching to Pamela. Pamela, what do you think, how do you in Herculate go about communicating, the goals and ensuring that employee goals align with company goals?
We actually approach it very similarly to Diane and her company. We also have monthly meetings. We, of course, use Profit Co. To put our high-level goals in and kind of build down from there. The transparency, like her company, I would say in the last 3 years, we've also become more transparent and really been more open and focused on concentrating on bringing those goals from the top down, so everyone understands how you make a difference, how does your contribution add value, and how are you playing into that high level strategic goal.
Okay, awesome. And in both the cases, it's pretty fascinating that in both the cases, in the last few years, there has been more transparency and, more willingness to sharing the company level goals. What do you think are the reasons? I mean, is it, I'm hearing from some folks that, as more and more Gen Z comes into the workforce, right? You want to make sure that, their levels of engagement goes up, and probably also post-COVID, everybody wants to work in a very purpose-driven environment, right? These are things I've heard, but what are your reasons, Pamela?
For us, I've been here 3.5 years, so that's really been one of my main focuses is working on associate engagement. And as a team, we've really focused on trying to pull together and make sure everybody's moving in the right direction. I think COVID hit everyone hard, especially for those of us where your business really spiked up. There were a lot of people who at the time weren't really interested in working, especially in manufacturing, because you can't work from home when you're in manufacturing. But I really think that's kind of what set it off, was competing for those high level individuals and Gen Z, because manufacturing in the United States tends to be more of the older generation out on the floor, and trying to attract some of those younger people into our company and engage them so that they can see that they have a career where they can grow and how they make an impact on the business.
Great. And I think, so now that we have established that, communicating the company goals frequently, right? And it's great to know that you are doing it almost on a monthly basis, with a lot more transparency in the last few years, right? So you have now done the communicating the company goals, but now from there, what are the next steps? How do you really cascade those company level goals into departmental goals, team goals, maybe individual goals? How does that process, happen in your companies?
So for
Yeah.
us, obviously we use Profit to do that, and the approach that we've taken is to have the company-wide goals for Henry to let the company know, and then from there we have the departmental managers will take those and create goals that are related to the company ones, and then kind of cascade it down. We originally started with giving or having all employees do objectives and key results in Profit. And we found that our employees weren't ready for that. So we scaled it back a bit and, changed our approach because we believe in the model and we believe in, communicating and letting employees know what's going on. But we also recognize that we kind of took a step too big with that and scaled it back. But it's been a very positive approach and very well received in the organization.
Awesome.
And we're also very similar to her, although we took a baby step. I think we ended up in the same place as Diane, where not everyone is using it, like from the level of setting the OKRs. But it's helpful because those managers can take it and then they can cascade it down. Like she said, they know their people, they know their aspirations, they know what their career goals are and where they want to grow. So they kind of take that responsibility to find where they can fit into those goals that benefit the company, but also benefit them as well individually.
Sure. And in this process, in fact, Diane, you alluded to this already, right? How does the employee feedback play a role in goal setting, right? Is it a one-way direction, or is there a feedback loop? How does it happen in your organizations?
It's definitely a two-way communication, and we, employees know their jobs, their best, and how what they can do to help the company achieve goals. So it's definitely a two-way street. As an organization, we like to have a great amount of detail in terms of objectives and key results, how we're getting there. And my focus also has been to not make more work for our managers and employees by using this model, And so working with the department managers as well as their employees in how we are communicating the information. So I don't want employees to have to duplicate things. So it's definitely been a two-way street in terms of having those views be moving in the same direction.
Nice. Okay. And Pamela, probably, if there's something that you would like to add there, you could add. But I also have another question, Pamela, you could start with this, is that, what is the role of HR, right, in this whole goal setting process, right? Does HR orchestrate that, or is it driven more by line managers, and HR facilitates that? How does that interaction happen between HR and business?
I'd say for us, it's driven by the leadership team. So as a senior leader, we're accountable for ensuring that, we're checking in, that we're talking about where we are on our goals, and that we're pushing those down further and further within our teams. I think HR acts more as a facilitator in that and making sure everything is aligned. And, if people provide feedback outside of their own department, or if they provide us with information on, hey, this is what I really want to do from a career standpoint, we communicate and facilitate that with the manager to ensure that they know where they want to go.
Sure. And now that you have set the goals, cascaded them down, right, to the department levels and probably individual level goals. Right now, as the quarter rolls on, as the year rolls on, how does the feedback process work? Right? Do you wait till end of the year for doing the performance reviews, right? Or do you follow a different process?
So for the Siemon company, for the entire time that I've been there and prior to that, we've done quarterly reviews with our employees. It coincides with a bonus program that all employees are eligible for, and so we do that at least on a quarterly basis, and encourage obviously our managers to do frequent one-on-ones, whether it's every week, twice a month, once a month. To continually have that feedback, because nothing in a performance review or an evaluation should ever come as a surprise. And so we have the opportunity in the framework of our program to visit and revisit what the priorities are, and if we need to change them, we're able to do that timely.
That's awesome. And Pamela? Yeah.
We still have annual reviews that we do just to kind of cycle in when our merits are all due. But we also so we're probably a little less mature in the development of it than Diane's company is. I'd say right now what we're doing is working with our supervisors to make sure they're doing those one-on-ones twice a quarter with everyone on their team, making sure they're touching base on a formal basis. On an informal basis, of course, they have one-on-ones, probably weekly or daily, but to have those formal sit downs, we're really trying to move to that model of 2 times a quarter right now. Make sure you're meeting with every person and sharing that. So we're kind of building it and in the less mature stage, I think, than Diane's company is right now.
No, I think this is what you're doing, Pamela, right? While you may consider it to be still in a maturing situation, right? But just the fact that you are having these conversations twice a quarter, right? These feedback conversations twice a quarter, and that's an amazing best practice, right? And folks, and we're going to break for a question from Surina Iyer in the chat from Malaysia, right? Surina from Malaysia, right? I'll come to that in a moment, to both of you, but. I think one of the best practices that we are seeing, folks, across our customer base is that, the more, enlightened customers, right? There is a very concerted view, right, to move away from just the end of the year performance appraisal, right, to a more continuous, conversation-based performance approach, right? So you may not do, these quarterly or like what Pamela mentioned, twice a quarter conversations, with the same, I would say, with all the bells and whistles or the exact rigor of what you do by end of the year, but you still want to have a coaching conversation, right, between the line managers and the folks, right? So that really ensures that you're not waiting till it's too late, to give the feedback, right? So this is absolutely a best practice, right, that we're seeing, and I'm very happy that both of you have highlighted that, right? So now going to this question from Serena, and before even I asked the question, she has Serena has mentioned that about OKRs, right? But goal setting doesn't have to be through OKRs, right? You may follow your own framework, right? In this case, both of them have using OKRs, but we'll take OKRs as synonymous with goals, right? But the question is, OKRs are supposed to be a mix of bottom-up and top-down approaches, right? But more often than not, Surina feels that they are pushed from the top, which makes it challenging for employees probably to even accept it and drive accountability. How do you manage this situation, right, where employees could feel that it is really done top-down without their feedback, right? Is there a conflict there? How do you resolve the conflict? How do you handle that, right? Either of you.
So I would say that we are really wanting to build the trust with our employees, that they feel they can say, wait a minute, I'm not sure I can do that, or I don't think that's the best use of my time. And if there's a compelling reason, I know our managers are open to saying, okay, let's consider either a different goal or a different way of doing that. I think that's where the synergy can come from, as opposed to employees saying, this is what I'm going to work on, which is good, but it also needs to align with what the manager's responsibility is for making sure the departmental goals are met to help the company achieve its goals. So I do believe that there is an exchange there, and if there's a reason to do it, we can certainly make changes to that, based on employee feedback. But somebody's got to lead that, lead the effort, and I think we do a good job of that, and then also listening, to the employees.
So Dan, from what I understand, you were saying that there is a cultural climate, right, in Siemon, which encourages employees to provide their feedback, right? And even go as far as to say that that may not be the best use of my time, and they are able to do that. But managers, if required, may have to highlight how it is vital for the department, right? To get this done, right? So that is a bit of a compromise, and so it gets resolved between the manager and employee through a conversation, right? That's what I understand. Okay, and
yes,
and Pamela, your thoughts, please.
So I would say our objectives are pretty broad. They're, some might be stretch goals, some are, where we want to be in 3 to 5 years. So they're pretty broad, which allows us a lot of flexibility as you kind of roll those down. But we have Gemba boards that our associates put ideas in. So there are a lot of objectives and goals that actually are created from the bottom up, because a lot of those things will fit into those big overarching strategic goals or objectives that we put in place. So again, like Diane said, ours kind of is from the top, but also from the bottom, because those ideas are coming from them, and they create those ideas of new goals or, new key results that we want to set in to try to get to where we want to go on a broader scale. So like her, we try to build trust. We try to be open. We do a lot of training with accepting feedback, listening to your staff and things like that, so that no one's getting upset or, slighted by the fact that people on the floor are providing these ideas and they're being used.
Yeah, that's awesome, right? I mean, that's amazing. That really truly reflective of, I would say the psychological safety, right? That exists probably in both of your organizations, that really provides, a lot of confidence for employees to voice out their opinions, right? And folks, I would like to highlight a couple of examples here, right? For people who are familiar with the Toyota manufacturing system, right? So one of the founding principles of Toyota production system is that, if an employee finds a problem, right, in the product, in the car, right, they are empowered to stop the assembly line, right? So they can just pull and stop the assembly line, right? To really making sure, that, the problems are fixed, right? So they are empowered, even though the production numbers might fall, right? So that level of freedom and psychological safety, right, has led to a state where today, Toyota products are synonymous with reliability and quality, right? And on the other side of the spectrum, right, many of you may be following the news about Boeing, right? Where a lot of whistleblower complaints are coming now, where employees gave the feedback, right, about potential safety issues, right? Which were never, which were probably not taken very seriously or probably even suppressed, right? And the impact of that for Boeing today, right, where their brand has been damaged, their financial losses, right? That's really a pretty serious problem, right? So I thank Diane and Pamela for really sharing these experiences. And so great question, Surina, and folks, keep your questions coming, and we will pull in relevant questions as we have just done. Now, switching gears a bit, right? I wanted to ask this about one of the core problems that employees perceive about performance review, right? I just gave some stats, right? An overwhelming majority of employees globally feel that the performance evaluation process is ridden with bias, right? So, Pamela, maybe wanted to ask you first, right? What are your views on this, right, about bias in performance reviews, and what do you think are the steps that you would like to do or you're currently doing, at Herculite? What are your thoughts?
Well, that's a good question. And it is tough because subjectivity, I think, comes into any type of feedback process. So we do a lot of training. When we do our formal performance reviews, we kind of do like a rubric, like a rating rubric, where we have ratings and we give examples, specific examples of things that people have done. And then we require them to document those things. So especially if you're really low or really high, we want to know what was the person doing that was so awesome that they decided they needed to be at the highest category, because having them put down those examples makes you objectively think about it to say, oh yeah, okay, well, so this person did the same thing, so that we can put those in there. The other thing we do is we also go through and try to calibrate reviews, because one of the biggest issues we have isn't within the supervisor, but it's from supervisor to supervisor. So we do have to go in and calibrate where the average person is in each department to make sure that when we're looking at a company, everybody's kind of on that level playing field, because some do have managers that are just more difficult raters than other ones, even though they have the same accomplishments. And so, yeah, and we do a lot of training, a lot of awareness, a lot of, we don't call it DEI, but I'd call it like civility and respect in the workplace, and, accepting people for who they are, and accepting new, fresh ideas, and embracing that people are different in many different ways, because it really helps us as a company see things from our customer standpoint more broadly.
Sure. Pamela, and I think that's a great learning there for all of us, which is, making it more and more database, evidence-based, right? Where you record, the reasons, right? Clear reasons why somebody is rated. Particularly, I really like the fact that you mentioned that, if it is somebody who has a very high rating or a low rating, and of course, calibrating it across different evaluators and different managers to make sure, that somebody who's too liberal or somebody who's too strict, right? You are able to balance all of that through this calibration process, right? I mean, that absolutely sounds fascinating, and great that HR, is actually doing it and doing an evidence-based one, recording it, particularly if you have a technology to support it, right? I mean, that's really awesome, right? And Dan, what are your thoughts on this topic? How have you handled this before in your life, and as well as in Siemon as well? Yeah.
Well, I think that similar to Pamela, our managers are human, and they have their perspectives that they're coming from. I would say that our technical managers tend to be more strict, or tougher grader, if you will. But they have they have their ways of doing that and their reasons for it. And I do believe that they are consistent within their teams. But it is hard, to evaluate the contributions of one group relative to another. Obviously, companies need everybody working towards the same goals, but there are some departments that are truly project driven and results oriented, and that usually tends to be much more objective. Did you finish it? Did you not finish it? Versus some of the more service organizations, and how you do things. And so I think we do a good job of trying to, again, like Pamela's company, tell us, the highs and the lows. If someone's rating has changed drastically, and I'll use that term loosely, but explain to us, so that you can explain to the employee why there was a change and what is the difference. At the end of the day, we're human, and as much as we try to take subjectivity out of it, that is a reality, and I think makes us who we are by being able to give that feedback. And I think if you have the trust and transparency, it goes a long way to that. I know for myself, I don't wait for a review time to let someone know, I thought we were going to do this or that, or great job, either way. And when it becomes a part of normal everyday conversations, then I think it's less threatening, and in a lot of cases, better received.
That's awesome, right? Thanks for sharing that, Diane. There are a couple of more questions, and we'll pick up one right now. There's another question, interesting question from Surina. Since we are on this topic of performance reviews, right? A question from Surina is, how do you handle situations where employees fail to meet the goals, right? What kind of support or adjustments do you consider?
I can go first.
Sure.
When employees are not meeting the expectations, we obviously, our managers will work with them. We also have a process. We call it a performance improvement plan. You identify clearly what the employee needs to improve on. You give them the metrics, the time frame, what is success. And I think we truly believe, and I have a lot of examples within the company over my years there, where that has actually improved the employee's performance and has worked exactly the way that it's intended. The intention is to help the employee improve. Some people will say, well, you're just using that as a reason, to fire me. And I'll say, well, we don't really need that. We are truly trying to help you. And I can, one example, early on in one of our employees' career, sales employee was put on a performance improvement plan, and probably 5 years later became the top salesperson in the company. So, I think it depends on how it's presented, and the trust between the manager and the employee. I also very much want the HR staff involved in that. I think we can help facilitate those discussions and help the manager and the employee, but the communication and the message needs to come from the manager to the employee. And we do a really good job of helping to facilitate that when needed.
That's quite an extraordinary story, and thanks for sharing that, Diane. Right? An employee who was say in sales not performing well, and the fact that you did a PAP with that person, and in a few years that person becoming a top performer, right? I mean, that's a pretty inspiring story. So it's great to know that sometimes these performance issues may lead to ultimately happy endings, right? That's a fantastic example, and it's great to know that performance reviews are not about always, let's say, trying to cover your base before you take some decision, but it's really towards helping the employee as well as the company probably achieve success, right? That's quite an inspiring story, right? And Pamela, from your side, how do you any experiences, how do you handle somebody not hitting their goals?
We're actually very similar to Diane's company. We do the performance improvement plans as well. I think the most important thing, and I'm sure they do it as well, is it's never a shock when somebody's not meeting their goals because you're talking so often about it and providing resources as you go and trying to pivot if it's needed. That when you get to that performance improvement plan, like she said, you have the trust. I think the managers are already trying to support, or the supervisors are already trying to support them. I find that the most difficult thing for my supervisors with the performance improvement plan is being objective, being able to measure what you're putting on the performance improvement plan so that you clearly know and they clearly know, did you meet it or did you fail in trying to meet that? And like her company, HR facilitates that. We're involved in it. We help to write it, but it is given by the manager because it is their person. So we're very similar to hers.
I think that's an amazing, I would say, response in the sense that, one, key takeaways here, right, folks? One, they are not waiting till the performance process, right, to spot problems, right? So they are, number one, even while fixing the goals, right, you're making sure that the goals are clearly measurable. The goals are communicated pretty well, right, between the person who's going to perform, or the team that's going to perform, as well as the manager, right? So everybody's absolutely on the same page about what constitutes success and what constitutes, not so great performance. Number one. And number two, I think I really like the fact that you mentioned that, there are continuous conversations, right? So it's never a surprise, right? It's never a surprise, or you try to avoid surprises. It is a very, very proactive approach. And, I really like both these responses. And that's pretty helpful. Now, we will probably pick up one question from the audience. There's a question from Maria for both of you, right? Maria has addressed this, asking, I have a question for both of you. How do you guide managers in breaking down business and functional goals to individual goals, right? So that's number one, right? In any guidance that you provide. And then the second question Maria has is that, are there situations where individuals may, achieve their goals, but it doesn't lead to really achievement of higher level company goals, right? High level goals, company goals, right? Does that happen? It's clearly a question on alignment, right? Is the alignment tight? How do you ensure that the definition of the goals, how do you do it, right? And also, once you do the evaluation, if it has not led to, delivery of company goals, what do you do, right? Would any of you like to take this?
Sure. I'll go first. I think in looking at an employee's performance and what we ask them to do, there's really nothing, as an example, that my boss would ask me to do that's not somewhere in my job duties, right? I'm not going to be asked to create the next patch cord, for example, because that's not my realm. But so every objective that I would have or project would be related somehow to what I do. And I encourage our employees to and managers to use buckets of job duties and give examples of what the employee needs to do. We have, I mentioned before, in our engineering team, very detail oriented, very focused on projects. But in the end of at the end of the day, one engineer is not doing a project by him or herself, right? It's a team effort. And so what we've really tried to work with in helping kind of merge those things is that the employee, what can the employee do to contribute to completing that project? But as a company, we need to say, did we release the product on time or did we not? And what we were finding is that we were trying to overinflate at times the scoring, if you will, for the employee on that project because they worked really hard. So really trying to separate that and saying the employee contribution to the objective and to the key result is is, separated from did we achieve it or did we not? Because by saying an employee, because we wanted to give them a good rating on a particular objective, wasn't really the benefit of the company because we didn't achieve it, but it looked like we did because we wanted to recognize the employee's effort. So over the last year or two, we've really tried to separate those things and say, did we do it or did we not? As a company, did we do it? Did we not? And then the employees' performance towards that is evaluated separately. So I'm not sure if I answered all of it, but that's something that's been very effective for us.
Sure. I think thanks for those insights. It's pretty informative, right? And Pamela, would you like to add?
Yeah, so we're very similar. Sometimes there are goals and they don't get completed because sometimes you're pivoting in the middle. So to Diane's point, that person worked really hard. They put a lot of effort. Maybe they're even a top performer, but sometimes, where you think a goal is going to go, it doesn't quite go there. Maybe it's going to take a little bit of extra time to do that. So again, being open and being flexible to pivot when you need to. We also, like her, try to separate your completion of goals from your performance. It is important. We've done that since we've gotten into the OKRs to say, because some of the goals that we're working on are stretch goals. So, we're kind of along the lines of, if everybody's always 100%, then the goals probably aren't difficult enough because we shouldn't always be 100%. We want to be stretching people. We want to try to give people challenges and things like that. So we kind of look at it that way from a perspective of, like she does. You separate out, did they achieve the result and what was your performance on it? From people's goals aligning with it, each person is encouraged to have a career goal as well. So while we have these goals that align directly into our strategic objectives, we encourage people to have a personal goal as well. So, if there's something you want to do or aspire to do within the company, we do our best to try to align that with our objectives. If we can't, we still try to help them meet those goals just as a person and as an investment in that person.
Sure.
Because as HR people, if we're not training you for your next job, we're probably not succeeding. So I kind of feel like we have to continually train people for the next job, next place, next career.
Sure. That's pretty informative. Thank you very much, Pamela and Dan. And just to add to that, folks, what we have found as best practice is that if you take a company level goal, right, for example, let's say you want to do a sales of, 50% growth in your sales, right? The challenge here there is to translate that into departmental goals. Maybe product team needs to contribute, to developing some new products. And then from there, there are other sub-departments, maybe quality needs to contribute, maybe engineering needs to contribute. And then you can cascade it down into department, sub-department. And one of the best practices that we have found is to really attach ownership, for those specific goals, right, to individuals. So if that's the case, then, obviously for meeting a very high level goal, there are interdependencies, right? If the product team and engineering teams have done their work, but sales could not convert those to opportunities, obviously the higher level company goal is not going to be met, right? So in those cases, what we have seen as best practices that a lot of companies try to, while rewarding people, try to have a mix of, some weightage for company performance and some weightage for individual performance, right? And particularly the company performance weightage may be high, right? If you are a little higher up in the ladder. And so people do different approaches to make sure, one, the goals are, correctly aligned, right? And then, while evaluating the performance, you are really giving a good mix of weights for company achievement of goals and individual contribution, right? So that's what we're seeing. We have a couple of questions on the Q&A chat, one on using technology and another on, the performance indicators, right? We will really come to that in a moment. Probably we can take the question from Dakarai, right, in Q&A, right? So the question is, should performance indicators remain the same from year to year, or should they be adjusted based on the previous year's performance, right? How do you address individuals who are accustomed to maintaining the same practices over the years, right? I think it's, Pamela, the question that you mentioned about stretch goals, our goals changed year after year, specific KPIs, right? And, how do you work with individuals who are a little hesitant and they're, to change and, taking more stretch goals? I think that's the question.
I would say that, I don't know, you might need to rephrase the question for me.
So yeah. So the question, and in case Dan, in case you want to go first, please feel free. But the question is, should performance indicators remain the same, right? And this is from year to year, or should they be adjusted based on the previous year's performance, right? So while setting the goals, do you do that? So that's question number one. And the question number two is, how do you address individuals who are accustomed or too used to maintaining the same level of goals year over year, same level of goals and same practices year over year? So I think that's the question. Yeah.
I would say nothing ever remains the same for us. We review it and we change it. Often we change our expectations. So as people continue to grow, our expectations would grow. And that goes with whether it's feedback or ratings, or those goals and objectives or key results. I would say we do look at the prior year and we do push forward to improve them, but nothing ever remains the same. We're always moving, if that answers the question.
Yeah. So which means you have set the expectations as part of in the organization that things are not going to change year over year. So which means, that if that message happens, right at the time when people are onboarded, that, this is how we work,
Yep.
this is how we operate, and, just be prepared so there are no surprises. People expect that year over year, things are going to change. And, obviously you went through huge surges during COVID. Obviously people have gone through that, momentum and surge, right? So that's pretty expected, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think people expect change. We're pretty upfront that, we're going to continue to grow. And, if you're not making strides to move forward, then you're remaining in the same spot, which means you're really going backwards because everyone else is moving forward. So, yeah, I would say that that's the big piece of creating a culture where you have that trust and feedback, is that when the changes do occur, people aren't suspicious about them, and we explain them and we talk about how they're going to impact them and how it's going to improve their jobs and the company as a whole. So it's really about that communication and trust piece that allows us to be able to change. It's not about changing it so somebody fails or changing it so somebody succeeds. It's changing it because it's what the company needs, and we need people to be flexible with that.
Sure. Awesome. And Dan, is there something you would like to add there? Yeah.
Yep. So obviously, we change our goals as well. What we don't change though is how we expect people to do that. We are very focused and grounded in a company culture code and our company values that we expect all of our employees to adhere to. Those are the cornerstone of what the company was founded on, and how we expect employees to engage with each other. For example, you could have an employee who does everything that you ask them to do, but they can't get along with anybody. It's peace at any price, and no one wants to work with them. So they did everything you wanted them to do, didn't really like the way that they did it. All of our employees throughout the entire company, 25% of their rating every performance review time is based on adherence to our company culture code. That's how strongly we feel about it. So it's not just what you do, but how you do it. And those things don't change. And we also have peer-based awards, peer-nominated awards based on our values, and giving examples of how employees, have lived it in the course of their everyday life with us.
I think you brought in a very, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Pamela.
I was going to say, to add to that, I agree with her. And I think it's really important to be flexible, because you don't want somebody backed into a corner in a goal where people are doing things that are outside of your code or outside of your ethics, where, people are so desperate to accomplish these goals that you're not separating, again, the performance and their your cultural aspect, because you don't want to back people into corners where they're doing things and cutting corners that isn't going to benefit the company as a whole.
Great. I think that's Very insightful, and thanks for bringing that up, Diane. The importance of values and culture, and it's not just about performance, right? So if you have a player delivering on goals, but doesn't subscribe to your values or doesn't get along with folks, there is a correction required there, right? Behavioral change required there, and I'm very glad that you highlighted it, right? We have a few, we need to move to one more area which we have not really covered, right? Which is what sort of employee engagement that you do, and also even what sort of technology, that you are actually using, right? But before that, just probably one quick question from Satabdi Rai, right? Satabdi wants to know, a very difficult task, which sometimes all of us have to do, which is how do we individually deal with underperforming employees, right? What has been the experience? I know, Diane, you mentioned a very good example of, that PAP is one, but, while handling, is there any personal example that you can think of, any of you, right? Where you had to go through that difficult situation of dealing with an underperforming employee and, handling the situation, right? Any stories, any experiences that you have, if there's anything that you could share. Yeah.
I mean, I would say it's kind of cliche, but honesty. You're not doing the employee or the company any good by not being honest with them and giving them constructive feedback. If it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit. And we can recognize that, and we will help our employees in any way that we can to improve their performance with us. If it doesn't look like that's going to happen and it's not the right fit, we will work with them to help them do something else. And so I think, again, it's how you're able to deliver that message and the trust and the genuine desire that you are helping the individual. I'm not doing this. It's not a punishment. We're really trying to help you. And, and we'll ask them too, is this really what you want to do? I think that is a very honest question. And, we listen to what the employee has to say. A lot of times they'll say, yes, I want to do this. And we will do whatever we can to help them. Sometimes they'll say, you know what, maybe I don't really want to do this, or it's not the right job for me anymore. And that's okay too. But honesty and the way that message is delivered is so vital to having positive outcomes, even if it's meaning that, the relationship may change at some point.
Sure. And that's awesome. And, I think I really like the fact that you mentioned, which is really honesty and, having the right level of communication and doing it in a very dignified manner, right? And so it's not a question of, the employee's worth, right? But it's more a question of, fitment to that particular situation, fitment to that specific set of culture, values and all of that, right? So that's, pretty important. Now, switching gears, we just have 5 more minutes to go, right? Probably just one question in terms of, employee engagement and keeping the motivation on, right? While throughout the year, I know that you do, conversations, regular conversations, but to keep the employee engagement and motivation on, do you do anything special to recognize and reward employees, on the spot or, continuously? What are your thoughts on it? What do you think works? What do you think, may not be a thing that works very well? Yeah.
So we approach it in a number of different ways. We have challenge coins that we provide people from our president. So if somebody has participates, accomplishes, dumps something above and beyond, our president will go out and give them a challenge coin, and everybody wants a challenge coin. So it really keeps people thinking about, what can I do? How can I, what are the things I can do to get that? We also do tokens of appreciation. They're just small tokens that peers can give to one another. They can turn those in for nominations. They can turn them in for prizes, things like that, so that gives them the ability to recognize one another, not just from management, but you can appreciate your coworkers. And then next year we're actually we're going to call it Third Thursday, where we're going to have popcorn with a popcorn machine. We're going to make popcorn every third Thursday and make sure that, that's where we do a lot of public recognition, is during that kind of celebration each month. So that'll start up in January for us.
Okay. That's awesome. I think some key takeaways, one, you have structured programs every month, right, for doing it, and you also do encourage peer-to-peer, contributions, right? And I really like the challenge coins as well, right? A lot of very practical ideas. Thanks, Pamela, right? And Dan, any thoughts from your side?
Yeah, very similar. We have, as I mentioned before, employee nominated peer awards, and we recognize those in our monthly town hall that our president delivers, as well as publishing them. We do a company newsletter several times a year, so we mention that as well. And again, recognition. Spot things. Wow, this team really worked together. They had a really tight deadline. They completed it, and we'll celebrate with, a cake or pizza. They love to do pizza. It's all about food. But, those are very, helpful in terms of, really signaling that we want everyone to work together and we want to hear your ideas and appreciate, your coworkers.
Sure. So yeah, I think the great responses, and we have probably two more questions right before we end this lovely session. There's a question in chat from Elias, right? So Elias is that what are the strategies that you apply to build trust on the whole performance management process, right? So Elias feels, particularly when performance management the trust on performance management has fallen down or, is not considered, very important. But overall, how do you build the trust on the whole performance management process, right? That's his question. Yeah.
For us, we don't just focus on one piece of trust. So I can't really say that we do any trust on the performance management. I think we just build it as a whole. So empowering people, when knowing that, when they offer suggestions, we're going to follow up with them, whether we, take that suggestion, or if we can't, why we don't, that we're open to feedback, both upward and across. So, if you have feedback for your supervisor, we want you to tell them if there's something that you feel could be done better. We want to hear that. So I really think it's building that trust for us across the board, because I think that can flow into anything. Because once you build that trust and respect, I think you can just have conversations with people and they're going to take you more at face value. So for us, that's kind of how we do it.
Sure. Thanks. And
we also there's a program that we share with leaders and employees alike on building trust and having, making deposits and withdrawals and things like that. And so everybody is really on the same page with, we expect everyone to have that open dialogue and develop trust, as Pamela said, across organizations and, vertically, in a company as well.
Yeah, and Elias, I think there are a lot of very interesting answers which came even before for this question. The trust and performance management really starts, at the beginning of the year, beginning of the period, when you are doing goal setting in a very collaborative way, right? You take feedback from employees, while you are fixing the goals, you are cascading, clearly communicating to the team, how their work is going to contribute to the company level goals. Second, there was a point that was mentioned about continuous conversations, right? Almost twice a quarter or even more. And third, not always bad performance leads to, poor outcomes, right? There's a genuine attempt made, to make somebody work. And Diane gave a very good example of how, an underperforming sales employee in a few years became the top performer. And so you have case studies like that, right? Which are out for people and, out there. And also, I know one of them mentioned that, you really document, if there's a high performer, why, that person is rated as high or, the otherwise, right? So a very data-driven approach, right? And if you are doing continuous engagements, giving rewards to people continuously, then it's very visible, right? The performance management that, high performers who take stretch goals, get rewarded, for exemplary performance, right? We are by the hour, but probably one last question is, from Ria. Ria asked a long time back, how do you, how do you use technology? And are you using AI for, performance processes, right? what are your thoughts on using technology and specifically AI?
We obviously are moving into that arena. We use Profit obviously for our performance management system now, as well as our OKRs. And but not all our employees have a company email and sit at a desk with computers. So we do still have the way that we did it before. But regardless of the technology that we're using, the qualities and the measurements are the same, whether we're using it, in a web-based system, or if a manager is, doing a handwritten performance review. The expectations and the standards are still the same.
Sure, awesome. And Pamela, anything from your side?
I agree with her. We're in the same situation. Manufacturing, not everybody has an email. So while we use Profit Co, we actually use a system called Paylocity for our payroll system, and we send messages through that. So we use that a lot as our communication system because everyone gets a paycheck. Everyone can see it. So our learning management system is through there as well. So we try to utilize that as much as possible, putting out links and communications. For us, that's what we've found to be the best way to get that message across, especially to the people that don't have the emails. Of course, we still do the traditional bulletin boards and postings and paper stuff too, because there still are people that have a flip phone and they don't even have the smartphone. So we still do paper as well.
Great. And folks, what we are saying is that, AI needs, is being used very carefully, right? People want to still make sure that the process has a lot of human touch, and, you want to use AI specifically for the benefits of AI, which could be, really to summarize the performance of the employee across the board, to help the employee while they are actually crafting their, self-appraisal, right? Providing them support, right? To document all the instances where they have contributed. Similarly for managers, summarizing all the conversations. So there are a lot of very, very interesting use cases for AA, right? Ria and Profit.co is very actively working on building those use cases, and our customers have started using it as well, right? So we are couple of minutes over the hour. I know there are a few more questions, right? Probably we will, address those questions outside this. But I really wanted to thank you, Diane and Pamela, right, for really sharing some very insightful stories and your experiences. And also would like to thank the audience, right, for really staying with us and asking some great questions along the way. My apologies, we could not answer probably all the questions, but we have tried to answer a good representation of the questions, right? So thank you very much, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, folks.